a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. There are mysteries out there. Mysteries of life, the universe, and everything. The biggest mystery is, where can I get a good cup of coffee? It's a mystery no more. The best coffee in the universe can be found at 4501 McPherson, the Organic Man Coffee Trike. They have more than just the elixir of life. They have treats and things you can consume along with that fantastic coffee. Hey, I might be telling tales. The only way you'll know if I know good coffee is to swing by the Organic Man Coffee Trike and try a cup or 2 or 12. If it's too far to drive, check out theorganicmancoffeetrike.shop. You can solve at least one mystery in life. The Garrett Diaz asked if I would revisit the Bermuda Triangle, so I said, why not? I did a show back in July 14th of 2018, so it's been a few days, like 2,694 days. No wonder I'm tired. Why a triangle? Well, why not a circle or a square? Well, a square sounds like some kind of a dance, and the Bermuda Circle sounds like a cooking show. Although the nearby Sargasso Sea already had a reputation as being a mysterious region where ships became lost, the earliest written records of the Bermuda Triangle was written by Edward Van Winkle Jones of the Miami Herald, that was distributed by the Associated Press and appeared in various American newspapers in September 1950. He kind of gave the place its name. Since it was next door to Bermuda, the name became fixed with the location. The name Devil's Triangle was first coined by Vincent Gaddis, 1964. It was an article in Argosy magazine. Gaddis used the term to describe the area where a number of ships and airplanes had disappeared. I also did a show on the Sargasso Sea, August 20th, 2017. A witness who had sailed past the sea said that he had seen an old Roman trireme. Now, how did the witness know it was a Roman trireme and not a Greek? Maybe it was due to the number of oar decks. The Greeks had just one oar deck, whereas the Romans used 3. The more oar decks you had, the faster the ship could go. Once again, the so-called experts will say that the Romans and the Greeks never made it out this far because the Atlantic Ocean was scary. That's what they think anyway. While at the same time telling us that the Europeans were all afraid of the Atlantic Ocean, they say that other people were moving all over the world in their boats. Could a Roman ship have survived so long floating in the water? Well, maybe it wasn't really floating in the water. The Sargassum, which the Sargasso Sea gets its name from, is a kind of a seaweed that grows prolifically in the area. Perhaps the ship was actually sitting on a bed of this seaweed. Also, the Romans were pretty adept at putting waterproofing on their ships. With such calm water, and stagnant water at that, and no wind blowing, the wood could have lasted for hundreds of years. How long has the Bermuda Triangle been swallowing ships and planes? We don't really know. Ships have been sailing across the Atlantic a lot longer than the boys in the white lab coats are willing to say. The same people who tell us that the Polynesians rowed canoes from South Asia all the way to New Zealand will try to convince us that the Europeans were scared of the big water. No one in Europe thought that the earth was flat until the idea that medieval people thought the earth was flat appears in a group of writings that came out in 1830 as a way of detracting from the medieval Christian church, which is often blamed for restricting intellectual growth in that period. People were trying to give the Catholic Church a bad name, and so they accused them of all kinds of things. But like I said, that was in the 1830s, a few weeks after the actual occurrence. As for planes, the first recorded incident was December 5th, 1945, which you should know was known as Flight 19. The experts, once again, just love to blame Lieutenant Taylor for becoming disoriented and screwing up. The documentaries, as they laughingly are called, have made up recordings of him sounding like a little kid, getting all flummoxed and panicky. This is a knee jerk reaction anytime things go wrong. It was the pilot's fault. Taylor had 2,509 flight hours. 616 of those were in Avenger torpedo bombers. He wasn't just some kid fresh off the farm who didn't know what he was doing. Flight 19 consisted of 5 torpedo bombers, each with a 3-man crew. One airman had called in sick that day, so only 14 men flew. These planes each had 2 compasses, which is somewhat weird seeing as they all failed. I can understand 1 or 2 compasses going wonky, but 10? The folks wanting this whole situation to simply go away would prefer it to be the fault of the pilot and not something else. Think about it. 10 compasses all screwing up at the same time. Inconceivable. The Bermuda Triangle is also known as the Devil's Triangle, an area in the Atlantic Ocean noted for paranormal and mysterious disappearances, ships and airplanes. Sometimes just people will vanish. Now, if the people disappear off a ship, the ship should keep going on its own. If you disappear out of an airplane, well, the plane's going to eventually crash somewhere. Heavily trafficked by sea vessels and aircraft, this region covers 500,000 square miles. The triangle is the area between Bermuda, Miami, and Puerto Rico. They could have called it the Miami Triangle or the Puerto Rican Triangle, but Bermuda got the blame. Many sea vessels and airplanes are said to have mysteriously vanished without leaving any wreckage or bodies. To the east sets the mysterious area known as the Sargasso Sea. This is a giant gyre where the ocean currents flow around one point of ocean, forming a dead spot right in the middle. Way back in time, I watched a movie called The Lost Continent. Not the best Hollywood production ever to come out. Well, it wasn't even Hollywood, it was a Hammer film, but still. I'll bet a few of you remember watching it. People walking around on top of the seaweed using these giant balloons attached to harnesses to keep them buoyant. They also had great big things on their on their feet. It was something to watch, especially if you were a bit younger. I need to go back and watch it again. It was based on a book called Uncharted Seas, I believe. The book was okay, but at the time it was written in the 30s and it had kind of a bit of a racial bias to it. But if you can overlook just a few references to people of different colors in the book, it's not a bad read. It's just you have to adjust your thought process just a little bit. It's kind of like reading the original version of the War of the Worlds. You have to think in a different timeline. Anyway, I watched this movie, and the next day I asked my teacher about the Sargasso Sea. Well, she said there's no such thing, except you can find it on a map. The Sargasso Sea and the Bermuda Triangle share some real estate. They overlap, what could cause not one, but two mysterious locations to exist in the ocean right practically on top of each other. The triangle is not alone in its bizarre behavior. Ivan T. Sanderson found there were 12 vile vortices scattered about the planet, but in a pattern. They were equidistant apart and found along the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, one each in the North and South Pole. The vortices Sanderson included in his list were known for disappearances and the appearance of strange lights, as well as UFO sightings. There are other locations scattered about that are also triangles of bad happenings. The Bridgewater Triangle, the Lake Michigan Triangle, the Alaskan Triangle, all with bad reputations for sightings, encounters, and disappearances. Hmm. Time for some coffee. I don't know why, but my throat is doing things that it's not supposed to. A cruise bound for the Bermuda Triangle promises its passengers that they will receive a full refund if the ship disappears. The Ancient Mysteries cruise say, "Don't worry about disappearing on this Bermuda Triangle tour. The tour has a 100% return rate of your money should anything disappear. Passengers will undertake their journey to the Atlantic Ocean on the Norwegian Prima Line, heading from New York to Bermuda. Guests can enjoy an exclusive Twilight Bermuda Triangle cruise in a glass bottom boat, accompanied by experts who will answer any of your questions, like, where the heck are we? The passengers will have to shell out $1,900 or 1,450 pounds for one tiny little cabin on the ship. There are some things you just don't do. Go walking around in a graveyard at night. Whistle while in the woods. Take a banana on a boat. Say, "Boy, is it quiet tonight," while working in the ER. And you don't go on a cruise in the Bermuda Triangle. Why are they going to, why? Who are they going to give that refund to if the ship does disappear? John Hutchison, the mad scientist from Canada, the guy that makes cannonballs float in the air, theorized the Bermuda Triangle was attached to the Dragon's Triangle, which is near Japan. He said there might be some kind of a portal linking these two mystery locations together. The last time I heard from Hutchinson, he was planning to recreate the Philadelphia experiment. He likes to run with scissors. For no known reason other than sloppy research, the Mary Celeste is claimed to have taken place in the Bermuda Triangle. In 1872, the ghost ship of the Atlantic was found adrift without any crew or passengers. The lifeboat was missing, but none of the equipment that you would need to stay alive so far out at sea had been taken. The ship was found adrift west of Gibraltar, quite a ways away from the triangle. Just about every documentary on the triangle will mention the Mary Celeste, just because most people have heard the name, but they don't know where it disappeared. Well, where the passengers and crew disappeared. It's about 3,000 miles from Bermuda. I don't think the ship sailed that far simply because it was going from the New England area to England. So why would they sail south to Bermuda? In 1991, an article came out saying that treasure hunters had found Flight 19. They were looking for sunken ships carrying those hundreds of pounds of gold taken from the South America and Mexico when they spotted 5 airplanes sitting on the floor of the ocean. 5 torpedo bombers. This had to have been Flight 19 because there was only one time in history that 5 planes went missing in this area. A trip to the bottom was planned and a small submersible brought to the scene. Videotape taken by the submersible cameras at a depth of 600 feet show the planes sitting upright as if they had simply landed. They're almost in formation. The cockpits of 4 of the planes are open and there's nobody inside. All the Grumman torpedo bombers look in pretty good shape. The windshields and the gun turrets remain intact. The 5 aircraft are all within a small area of the ocean floor from each other. They couldn't see any human remains in any of the planes, which makes me wonder, if they're not in the planes, where did they go? Plus, seeing as one of the planes still has its canopy closed, there must be 3 bodies inside. It was part of the process. As a plane was about to ditch, the canopy was opened. You had seconds to get out before the plane sank, and opening the canopy took way too long. You literally had to crank that sucker back with a little arm, and well, it didn't open right away. It wasn't like planes today where the cockpit simply flies off with explosive bolts. On a few occasions, divers have found aircraft that, upon examination, the pilot or passengers were missing. The doors were all secured, and the seat belts were still fastened. But try as I might, I couldn't find the article that this was written about. Uh, the internet has gotten somewhat clogged up here lately. The Great Information Highway has a huge traffic jam on it, or it's under construction or something. Kind of like I 35 in San Antonio or I 45 outside of Houston, and nothing but construction. Funny thing about I 45, when I was young, like about 5, 6 years old, they were working on I 45. Any day now, they were going to finish. It's been a while. They're still working on it. The aircraft were located about 10 miles northeast of Fort Lauderdale by the crew of the Deep Sea, a high tech salvage ship that was sweeping back and forth along the coast of Florida looking for sunken Spanish galleons that had been laden with gold and silver. In the 6 months that they had been searching, the ship had found nothing. No gold, no silver, no sunken Spanish galleons, but they did find 114 ships and airplanes that had at that time not been charted. Believing they had found Flight 19, serial numbers were located and copied down. A check on these numbers managed to add more mystery to this find instead of answering any questions. These planes had all crashed on different dates, but wound up in the same location. 5 planes crashing and settling to the bottom in the same small area. What are the odds? As for Flight 19, it is still missing. June 18th, 2003, Frank and Romina Leone just bought a brand new 16-foot boat, and they decided to take it out for a test cruise. They love to go fishing, and it was a beautiful day to test out their new boat. They set out from Boynton Beach Inlet, Florida, and they were never heard from again. Both the couple and their new boat had vanished. The next day, when they didn't show up for work, friends and relatives became worried. They contacted the Coast Guard, who began a rescue mission. The search covered 35,000 square miles, ranging from Miami to Savannah, Georgia. No wreckage or any sign of the couple or their boat was ever found. Just something else that has vanished into the Bermuda Triangle. Here's an odd story that could be just about anything, from a stolen airplane to a pilot who wasn't qualified for what he was doing. December 2008, a propeller driven Britain Norman Trislander carrying a pilot and 11 passengers issued a mayday call while 16 miles southwest of Turks and Caicos Island town of Providencials. Caicos? Turks and Caicos. Yeah, it's another one of those hard to pronounce words for me. Some people it just rolls off their tongue. Me, my tongue is constantly doing battle with my teeth. Lieutenant Matt Morlog, a spokesman for the Coast Guard in Miami, said the agency sent out planes, helicopters. They searched a 3,000 square mile area, but they could find no sign of debris or any survivors. It didn't help any that the seas were quite choppy at the time, and there was a bit of a storm going on. Morlog went on to say that the plane might have diverted to another airport, but there is no report of it ever touching down at any place. The plane had taken off from Santiago in the Dominican Republic, and it was bound for Mayaguana, Mayaguana in the Bahamas, where it was to refuel, but it never arrived. Relatives of the missing passengers told the Coast Guard that the plane was actually en route for New York City. Kathleen Bergen, a Federal Aviation Administration spokesperson in Atlanta, said that the pilot had not filed any kind of a flight plan with the agency, and she had no idea where it was supposedly going. Bergen said, given the plane's range of 998 miles, it would have had to have stopped to refuel in Mayaguana before arriving in New York, a distance of 1,265 miles. There was no refueling plan registered with the FAA. Jose Tomas Perez, director of the Dominican Civil Aviation Institute, said the aircraft was supposed to be a regional flight for a small operation called Atlantis Airlines. FAA records show that the plane was registered to a company called the Puerto Rican Airline, which was based out of Carolina, Puerto Rico. Deepening the mystery, the company's owner, Luis Perez, no relation to the pilot, said the aircraft was for sale and it was only supposed to be inspected in the Dominican Republic. He said that the plane must have been stolen. Like I said, too many possibilities of what is going on here. It did disappear, and there are now 12 people missing, but nobody knows where the plane was going or why. Two teenagers were reported missing back in 2015. They had gone fishing off the coast of Florida, and it is believed that they sailed into the triangle. Perry Cohen and Austin Stephanos, both 14 years old, had decided they were going to take a fishing trip. The original plan said that they were going to stay in the Tequesta, Florida area, but then plans got changed. Cohen and Stephanos were avid fishermen and would go fishing any time they could offshore. The two boys would routinely check in with their parents every couple of hours. Yeah, we're still alive, having a great time, running out of beer. Oop, shouldn't have said that. The two boys would go fishing together a lot, and it was considered routine. Stefano's grandfather told reporters his grandson had been operating a boat for several years, and he knew how to sail as well as how to avoid bad conditions. He was quite comfortable operating the boat. About a week prior to their disappearance, Stephanos had stopped by the Marine Patrol office. Oh, he had been stopped by a Marine Patrol officer for a routine check, and all safety equipment mandated by Florida was on the boat. July 23rd, 2015, Cohen sent a message to another friend that read, "Me and Austin are crossing to Bahama tomorrow. Come with us." Another friend reportedly spoke to Stephanos about traveling to the Bahamas prior to their departure. Stephanos said that the weather was going to be a bit rough, but no worries. Cohen had asked his stepfather if he could borrow his GPS while on board the boat. The night prior to their disappearance, Cohen and Stefanos had spent the night together, and Cohen had told a friend they were planning to go fishing in the inlet. On the morning of July 24th, 2015, Cohen and Stefanos traveled to the Jupiter Island Marina where they boarded a 1978 Seacraft that was registered to Stefanos's mother. They were last seen at the Jib Yacht Club and Marina, where they bought $100 worth of gas, and they both texted their parents at about 11:30, saying that they had just left the marina and were en route to fish. Shortly after they left, there was a line of thunderstorms moving through the area that was broadcast by the National Weather Service. They issued a special report saying, look out for the storm. It was going to have winds in excess of 40 miles an hour. It is believed that the two boys were overtaken by the storm. Uh, Friends told reporters another post from the day from Stefanos' account was a video showing the storm heading towards their boat. A fund was created to pay for private searchers for the boys, and within a few hours had raised thousands of dollars. Dozens of people, including Joe Namath, had joined the search, and participants followed the shorelines and beaches looking for any signs of the two boys. Nothing was found. Multiple boats and aircraft were used to search the area. Coast Guard C-130, a Miami helicopter crew, an HR-144 plane, two Customs and Border Protection planes, and two Coast Guard cutters were used along with multiple private boats. Pilots offered their help. Everyone was getting involved. The search was made somewhat difficult as it was determined the boat was not equipped with an emergency positioning beacon, such as a radio or a GPS. Didn't the Marine Patrol officer report the boat was furnished with all safety equipment? The boat that the boys were operating was discovered eventually, July 26th, 2015, near Daytona Beach. The Coast Guard attached a data marker buoy to the boat, and then they left it in place because they were still looking for the two boys. The boat eventually turned up 100 miles from Bermuda on March 18th, 2016. They found an iPhone and other personal effects on the boat. The search for the boys was eventually called off in July. Due to the storm that occurred shortly after the boys had left the marina, the boys were declared missing. They were generally believed to be victims of the storm. However, with the discovery of the boat in 2016, the parents believed that there was potentially additional information about the fate of the two boys. The boat was discovered to have the ignition and the battery both switched off, which could potentially indicate foul play. If you're riding out a storm, you don't turn your engine off. There's no other evidence of foul play. All the items found in the boat were turned over to the families without any further investigation. 2017, a private plane carrying 4 people disappeared while flying from Puerto Rico to Florida. Despite extensive search efforts, the wreckage and the passengers were never found. December 2020, a U.S. Coast Guard was notified of a missing boat with 20 people on board. The boat had left Bimini en route for Lake Worth, Florida. It was a 29-foot Mako Cuddy cabin boat equipped with all of the latest emergency gear. It had an EPIRB, an emergency position indicating radio beacon. Boy, what a name. Couldn't they just call it an emergency beacon? An EB? When an EB, when an EPIRB touches the water, it activates automatically. You don't have to push the button. When it gets wet, it activates. It would send out a signal with the location of the vessel. No signal was ever sent out or received, so the boat didn't sink. There are people out there who prey on boaters in the area, kind of like the Somali pirates, only on our side of the world. If the boat was attacked, somebody on board should have made an emergency radio call or activated the EPIRB. There's a little switch on it that you flip and it goes off. Lets people know where you are. The Coast Guard and other agencies searched 17,000 square miles for about 84 hours before suspending the search. One of the more recent disappearances occurred in January 2023 in the waters off of the Bahamas. A private jet vanished without sending any distress signal. This element heightens the mystery surrounding the Bermuda Triangle, as the lack of communication typically suggests sudden mechanical failure or other emergencies. Suddenly your radio doesn't work, so you're sitting in the cockpit trying to call for help, and the signal's not going anywhere. Following the disappearance, the Coast Guard initiated a search operation. Teams employed both aircraft and ships in hopes of locating wreckage or the survivor. Despite these efforts, no trace of the plane was found. Several theories emerged regarding the disappearance. Some experts said it was nothing more than a mechanical failure, or, of course, the good old pilot error. Others highlight environmental factors such as a sudden storm or unique magnetic anomalies that may interfere with navigation. Or just maybe the triangle claimed another plane which will never be seen again. August 21st, 2023, a Cessna 402 was reported leaving the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. Why is it called Hollywood International Airport? Hollywood's in California, as far as I know. The aircraft, with one person on board, was last seen 17 miles west of Eleuthera Island in the Bahamas. Pervez Khan, who is from South Florida, took off from Florida in a small airplane heading to North Eleuthera in the Bahamas. Authorities said the plane was last seen 17 miles off the coast of the island. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the U.S. Coast Guard began searching the area that he was last seen in, but they found nothing. Khan's daughter said he knew how to fly through bad weather. She thought he must have gone off of the radar to avoid a bad stretch of weather. Khan had flown this same route hundreds of times. He'd been flying to and from the Bahamas for decades. Khan's family said they were unsure what led to his disappearance, but they believe the aircraft went down and possibly crashed in the ocean. If it did, where's the debris? Family members of the missing pilot hope to generate more attention to the disappearance, hoping that commercial pilots and sailors will somehow find their missing family member. Every couple of months, somebody comes out declaring they have solved the Bermuda Triangle mystery. It's kind of like Jack the Ripper. Every couple of months, somebody writes a book saying they have proven that Jack the Ripper is insert name here. The experts say that they have figured out what is causing planes and ships to disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. It is rogue waves, or methane bubbles, or electromagnetic interference, global warming, global cooling. The list is endless. There are also those who say that Atlantis used to set where the center of the Bermuda Triangle is today. There is a giant pyramid sending out power waves that affect ships and planes. I heard a caller on Coast to Coast many years back when Art Bell was still running the show. The caller said that he had dove on the pyramid and he had found it was still functioning. The very top of the pyramid was glowing with energy. Never heard anything more from the man. Was he making this up, or was he silenced? The boys in the white lab coat have announced the discovery of a temporal rift within the Bermuda Triangle. A temporal rift is a tear in space time and an extremely dangerous temporal anomaly. Encounters with temporal rifts usually end with the vessel making contact with the rift being transported to a different time or location. These are long associated with mysterious disappearances of ships and planes. This enigmatic region may now hold the key to achieving one of humans' greatest ambitions, time travel. The remarkable finding came from the International Time Studies Institute, which has been conducting experiments in the Bermuda Triangle for more than a decade now. Lead physicist Dr. Eleanor Richards revealed the surprising results at a press conference in Miami. She said they have identified a spatial anomaly causing distortions in the fabric of time. Using advanced monitoring equipment and satellite imagery, they were able to observe phenomena consistent with time dilation and, in rare cases, retrograde motion to specific coordinates within the triangle. In other words, time moving backwards. The most compelling evidence comes from a recent experiment involving a drone equipped with high precision clock and a GPS tracking device. After entering the anomaly zone, the drone returned with its clock inexplicably showing a time 14 hours before it had been launched. She went on to say this is not merely a theoretical observation, that they now have tangible evidence suggesting certain conditions within the Bermuda Triangle can create a portal to the past. The concept of time warps align with several historical accounts. Reports of lost hours, strange weather patterns, erratic navigational instruments may be connected to these time warps. If further research confirms the existence of a time rift, the implications will be monumental. The ability to travel time could revolutionize our understanding of history. It could revolutionize our understanding of life, the universe, and everything. This discovery raises significant ethical and practical concerns. Could altering the timeline create unintended consequences? You bet your life it will. How can humanity ensure this technology will be used responsibly? The short answer is we can't. You start messing with time, you're probably going to destroy the world. Despite the excitement, the scientific community remains divided. Critics stress the need for more peer review and independent validation. The purpose of peer review is to evaluate scientific merit of a submitted work and to assess suitability for publication. We can't handle the truth. This process is intended to provide an unbiased, independent critique to ensure publication of high quality manuscripts that demonstrate validity and reliability. The tradition of unpaid peer review is deeply rooted in academia. The modern form of peer review started in the 1970s as an assigned duty on paper, by mail, and in writing. You can't just whack the thing off on your computer. Scholars became peer reviewers as a voluntary service in order to advance their field, but also to keep it under control. This doesn't mean the people doing these reviews aren't biased in their opinions or that they might be protecting some of their own ideas. Albert Einstein did not like the peer review system. His first papers were denigrated by the reviewers, and from that time on, Einstein never submitted his papers to the peer review system. The folks in the military sat up and paid a lot of attention with this discovery. The military industrial complex sees everything as a source of income. War means more. Well, more for the military industrial complex. More income, more sales, more huge contracts from the military. Even if the Montauk Project was an ongoing experiment, there would be others trying to break into time travel and history manipulation. If the triangle is some kind of a time anomaly, would this suggest that Flight 19 wound up in some time in the past? If so, how long ago? Then again, could they have gone forward in time? Landed back in Fort Lauderdale, only they landed 100 years in the future. What if they land tomorrow? Will the government tell us? Nah, we can't handle the truth. In 1970, Bruce Gernon took fly a, took off flying from Bahama to Miami, Florida. He flew right through the triangle. Mid-flight, he ran into some kind of a bizarre-looking storm cloud, and he was forced to fly into a tunnel that was being formed by the clouds. The trip that should have taken 90 minutes only took 45 minutes. When Gernon filled his fuel tanks, it only took half as much fuel. This would imply that Gernon and his passengers had moved back in time, which all their watches, as well as the dashboard clock, all showed did happen. Everybody's clock was 45 minutes in the past. If you're sailing along as far east of the triangle as you can get, you you're trying to skirt the edge of the Bermuda Triangle so you don't vanish. You're going to run into the Sargasso Sea, which is a giant gyre where, for unknown reasons, the wind doesn't blow either. If you're in a sailing boat or a sailing ship, well, you're not going to go anywhere. These two anomalies overlap, creating an even more bizarre area. Most people were under the impression that the Sargasso Sea was there long before the Bermuda Triangle came into being. The triangle was there as long as anyone can remember. The Sargasso Sea has been there just as long. The two have probably been around for as long as the planet has been here. No one has managed to give the place a name until the 60s. That's when the Bermuda Triangle came into being named. Keep in mind that just because somebody names something, that doesn't mean that that's when it was created. Ships vanishing into the triangle were simply gone, whereas ships stranded in the Sargasso Sea were still there. The crews were trapped. There was no wind to push them along, and the seaweed was so thick that even if there was wind, it wouldn't help. On occasion, a ship would have its crew snatched from the decks as it passed through the Bermuda Triangle, and then it would wind up trapped in the seaweed of the Sargasso. No one ever thought to drag a camera out to the edge of the sea and capture photographs of this unearthly scenery. Today, there are plenty of photos of the weeds, but there aren't any pictures of the ships trapped in it. If there are, they're probably locked away in somebody's desk under national security. 1887, Commander C.D. Sigsbee of the U.S. Navy began a survey of the Sargasso Sea. He was documenting the ships trapped in the weeds as a navigational aid. With only eyes as a means of avoiding a collision at night, the survey was to plot on nautical maps and help ships avoid running into any of these floating wrecks. The survey took 7 years. During that time, Commander Sigsbee documented 1,628 shipwrecks that were visible inside the weeds of the sea. Steps were taken to determine the origins of these vessels. 160 wrecks were found to be registered in the United States. 134 ships were registered out of Britain. There were French, Norwegian, Swedish, even Russian ships mixed in with the floating graveyard. Since the Sargasso Sea was not stationary, these wrecks would move along with the seaweed. The entire thing is moving in a giant clockwise direction. They would slowly drift in the same direction. This movement was taken into consideration when plotting their locations. Some ships managed to stay afloat for years and circled the entire sea several times. The Fanny E. Woolston held the record for lasting the longest recorded time. The Woolston was a three-masted lumber schooner which was abandoned off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina in 1891. Why the crew decided to jump ship is unknown. Perhaps a storm or some other motivation came up. She was observed by dozens of other ships over the next 3 years. The Fanny E. Woolston drifted away from where the crew had last seen her. For the first year it kept going almost due east, then southeast. For the next year she drifted in a circle in the mid-Atlantic before drifting west once again. This would have been a cash cow for any salvage rights if anybody had tried to board the ship and then sail it to the nearest harbor. Any ships that came close enough to identify the Woolston quickly realized that this was a ghost ship, and therefore it was to be avoided. The ship did one more loop before drifting north and east, finally seeming to ride the currents of the Gulf Stream before finally being sighted for the last time October 21st, 1894. It is estimated that this ship traveled 9,000 nautical miles without a crew on board. Sigsbee wrote that he could see no less than 19 derelict ships adrift in the Sargasso Sea at any one time. No matter what time of the day they looked into this weird gyre, they could see at least 19 or more ships. There's no way of knowing which ships were abandoned and then drift into the seaweed, or which ships wound up trapped there, only for the crew to die from starvation and exposure. The use of lifeboats was out of the question, since the ship itself could make no headway and the smaller boats would be trapped as well. It's near impossible to row a lifeboat through the Sargasso Sea. The 7 year study that listed the 1,628 derelict ships listed all of these wrecks on nautical maps. The Sargasso Sea has been out there capturing sailing vessels for thousands of years. Just how many ships wound up spending their last years adrift in these weeds is anyone's guess. Some say maybe as many as hundreds of thousands. How many men and sometimes women died having their last view of the world as this gray green swamp of seaweed? Of all the reports I came across while researching this show, I never found one where a ship or its crew managed to escape the green death of this weird sea. I hate to think that at some point in time, the crew of one of these trapped ships spotted what looked like rescue coming close along the perimeter of the gyre, only to watch as the ship rescuers turned and sailed away, fearing that what they were seeing was not a trapped crew, but a ghost crew beckoning them to come join them trapped in the gyre. As far as crews of these passing ships knew, the drifters were ghost ships cursed by some evil element of the sea. Any members of the crew seen waving in an attempt to draw the rescuers would be deemed to be ghosts or simply demons trying to capture the lives of the sailors. Commander Sigsbee went on to command other U.S. Navy vessels. He was the commander of the USS Maine when it exploded in the Havana harbor, sparking the Spanish American War. The story of the Spanish sabotaging the ship, the Maine, which caused it to sink, was a headline grabbing story put out by a newspaper owner, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. There was no mine explosion under the ship that caused it to sink. The boiler exploded. The Spanish American War was started simply to sell newspapers. The Devil's Sea, also known as the Devil's Triangle or the Dragon's Triangle, the Formosa Triangle, or the Pacific Bermuda Triangle, is a region off the Pacific South, off the Pacific. No, it's a region in the Pacific south of Tokyo. Like I said, my teeth are fighting with my tongue, trying to get dominance of my mouth. The Devil's Sea is considered a paranormal location, though the veracity of these claims have been questioned by none other than the boys in the white lab coats. The first known record of a massive disappearance in the Devil's Sea dates back to the 13th century when Mongol Emperor Kublai Khan and Ali, no, that was Kukla Fran and Ali. Kukla Fran and Ali was a TV show that used puppets. It was created for children, but soon it was being watched by more adults than kids. It came out of Chicago October 13th, 1947, and it ran until 1957. Comedian Fran Allison starred, where she interacted with two puppets known as Kukla and Ali. The puppeteer was named Burr Tillstrom. After the original run, the team appeared in other productions over several decades. There were lots of reruns back when I was little, and that's how I got to watch it. Kublai Khan sent out an invasion of Japan without the help of Ali. Historical records say that he deployed a massive naval fleet, only for it to be mysteriously swallowed by the ocean before it could reach the Japanese shores. Some say that a divine wind or a typhoon, what they called a kamikaze, destroyed the armada. Modern oceanographers believe the truth may be even more bizarre. Divers and researchers have found strange wreckage scattered in odd patterns on the ocean floor. Some of these wrecks are embedded in volcanic rock, which is impossible under normal sinking conditions. In the 1940s and 50s, many fishing vessels and 6 military vessels disappeared between Miyake Island and Iwo Jima. August 1945, more than 3 months before Flight 19, a Mitsubishi Zero went missing. A distress call from Commander Pilot Shiro Kawamoto, who was crossing the triangle at the time towards the end of the war, has created many questions. The last thing his message said was, "Something is happening to the sea. The sky is opening up," followed by static and then nothing. One of the last radio transmissions from Lieutenant Taylor was similar. Something about the sky didn't look right. Yamiro Shimbun showed a map of the sea with pinpoints indicating the last known locations of several ships that had been lost over the years, and stated that these ships were lost within the area that the Yokohama Coast Guard office had declared as a specially dangerous area. One of the most documented modern disappearances occurred in 1952 when Japan sent a research vessel, the Koyo Maru No. 5, to study the Devil's Sea. The ship had top scientists, divers, and military personnel on board, along with a crew of 31 men. Just days into the expedition, all communications stopped. Rescue missions found no oil slick, no floating debris, nothing. The ship had simply vanished. The government labeled the area as being unsafe for sea travel and suspended all further missions. The event sent shockwaves through the international scientific community. What's most baffling is that the ship was heavily monitored using advanced radar communication equipment. Some investigators claim the area may contain magnetic anomalies so strong they disrupt electronic and compass readings. The complete erasure of the vessel's presence remains one of the greatest maritime puzzles ever recorded. Over the decades, multiple scientific teams have attempted to explore the Devil's Sea. Expeditions consistently report mechanical failures, bizarre sonar readings, equipment malfunctions. In one case, an underwater drone exploring a deep trench within the zone sent back distorted visual images, which looked like structures on the bottom of the ocean. Before further analysis, the connection was lost and the drone was never recovered. Some theorize that submerged volcanoes and shifting tectonic plates might be distorting the seafloor and creating optical illusions. Yet this doesn't explain the eerie radio interference or the strange hum that some crewmen report hearing while sailing through the area. If you are crazy enough to fly from the Bermuda Triangle to the Devil's Triangle, it would be the exact same distance whether you went east or west. The two vile vortices are straight across the globe from each other. Researchers now researching new material on the triangle is getting harder with each passing moon. The web is awash in naysayers, misdirection, folks who cut and paste without bothering to do any work of their own, on and on. I found a dozen articles about people who vanished into the triangle only to turn back up with some mundane explanation on what had happened. No time anomalies, no weird sightings, no UFOs. They're just the radio quit working, they sailed out of the Bermuda Triangle, nothing to see here. Makes me wonder about some of these people that like to just simply write articles to get their name in print. Makes me want to slap 'em about the head with a live badger. The idea of the triangle being some form of a time travel sounds very acceptable. But how far in the future or the past do the missing go? Did Flight 19 find themselves landing on some deserted beach somewhere, only to be chased around by dinosaurs or cavemen? How long would it take for their aircraft to dissolve into nothing? Maybe they simply washed out to sea. It would make more sense to think that a portal took them to some other dimension, someplace we may never see or hear of any evidence in the future. Perhaps these 14 men simply landed back in Fort Lauderdale, only in another dimension. If so, what could have happened to the 14 pilots from that dimension? I would like to think that all of the missing are somehow winding up in the same location, but that's just me. If you enjoyed tonight's show, if you did, spread it around. Tell other people they should be listening to Strange Things with Chris James. If you didn't like tonight's show, why are you still listening? Until next time, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight In the hanging tree,